Time to say a very good morning to Mr. Neil Oliver. Neil, how you doing?
Hello, Mike. Yes, hanging on in there.
Hanging on in
Fighting.
there. I must admit, I actually smiled, which I don't do that often these days when I read your column, because there was a certain kind of humorous desperation about it that we all, I think, can identify with. That, you wonder if you could go somewhere, anywhere, just to get the hell out of the situation that you're in.
Yeah, I think never in my life before have I had such a strong sense of the world having become a very small place. Because there's that feeling in relation to the pandemic and many other matters besides, that there's just nowhere to go.
Yeah.
You think if I was going to make a run for it to some kind of, utopia, some kind of free and untrammeled place where the living was good and there was liberty and all the rest of it. But where are you going to go?
Right.
You look at the world map and think, no, can't go there, no, can't go there, and so it goes on. And then you think, well, as really beyond the joking, all joking aside, you're eminently better off here. For all the shortcomings of the moment, the best chance of liberty, still in the free world is here or hereabouts.
Yes.
But it's just that feeling, that kind of claustrophobia, I think has become one of my symptoms. I just feel hemmed in,
Yes.
shackled, and there being nowhere to break free to, even if I could shrug off my bonds.
Yes, because even though at least you're in your home surroundings, which is a good thing because you're surrounded by all the things that you want and need and love, equally, if you can't leave that place, which I don't think you really can at the moment in Scotland, it becomes like a prison, doesn't it?
It does, and it's very. I find it. You learn things about your own psychology, and I think possibly just the psychology of the human species. How readily we have accepted this and grown used to it. It does demonstrate. I think it's a bit like people talk about when they get do time in prison. And they become institutionalized, and to such an extent that even when they're set free, the freedom is difficult to take.
Yeah.
Because they've become so familiar with the routine and being allowed to do certain things at a very specific time, and that structure becomes more important than freedom itself.
Yeah, it's true.
I've read that before and thought, however, how could that ever happen? But now I think, no, I absolutely understand why someone would get out of jail and then commit another petty crime just to get back in.
Yeah, I mean, I've had conversations with my family about, can we go anywhere, even if it was just for a little break, for a holiday of some kind. But I really don't like the idea of wearing a mask for such a long period of time, which involves, in an airport, on a plane, at the other end of an airport, 7, maybe 8 hours of torture for me. I mean, I can't even stand going on a short tube journey and having to wear it, So the idea of wearing it for hours on end just completely puts me off going anywhere.
My feeling exactly. All I've been doing is because I've accepted that those are the rules. I just don't want shouted at in the streets.
Yeah.
Well, no more than necessary. And so I've been, when I go to the one shop I go to, I put on a face covering.
Yeah.
My response really has been, I just don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to. My quest for freedom is just to only go out into the countryside. I just go out into the fresh air.
Yeah.
Where I don't have to look at people wearing masks and where I don't have to wear a mask myself.
Yeah.
That's as good as it gets for me. And yes, like you, the thought of going, airports are torturous places anyway.
Yeah.
There's so many, everything about them is difficult, security and all the rest of it. And the thought of adding on that layer of the mask wearing and then wearing the mask on no, I just won't go.
Oh. Are you also seeing this kind of creeping change in language, which I'm seeing now, where people will say things like, and I try and pick them up on it, you can't always do it, but when they say things like, oh, I don't know if we're allowed to do that, or I think we're allowed to do that, or can we do this? And it's like, just do what you want to do, man.
I know the principle has always been, the principle enshrined in common law is that you're allowed to do everything and anything unless it's specifically prohibited by an existing law.
Yeah.
But it's gone the other way, and how quickly it has gone the other way, that people are now assuming that they're not allowed to do anything. unless there's a specific line in the regulations that says they can.
Yeah.
So yes, I find myself in these conversations. We talk about Christmas coming up. It's inevitable from now on. People are talking about Christmas, and people are punctuating and peppering their comments with, "Well, we'll see if we're allowed to do that."
Yeah.
And we'll see if I can have my mother-in-law over.
Yeah.
You're assuming you can, but we'll find out if that's permitted.
Yes.
And that has turned everyone's understanding of freedom and what they're allowed to do has swung through 180 degrees. And now people are assuming that they're not allowed to do anything unless they're specifically told they can.
Yeah. Which is extraordinary, isn't it? Because you would never... I mean, I thought about this last night because I haven't used the tube, and I don't use the tube very often, but I was going out, so I decided I was going to take the tube. And I got off the train, and I walked along a platform, and it suddenly just struck me, here are all these people wearing masks. There was quite a lot of them, and it was horrible. And, you know, I don't see that a lot because I tend not to go on public transport. I mean, I'm in the street and people are wearing masks. It doesn't seem to be such a noticeable thing. But on the tube, when everyone's wearing them and they're all staring into their phones or they're, you know, not looking at each other, it's just really horrible.
Yes, it's the last act of isolation, I think. You know, there's a feeling that that every possible step has been taken to isolate us one from another.
Yeah.
At a time of great anxiety, when the natural instinct is to be with people and to be comforted by our fellow human beings, because we are social creatures, every last avenue to doing that has been blocked off, so that you can't go to the pub, you can't go out for a meal, you can't go to a gig, you haven't been able to go to a football match, you can't go to the theatre, you can't go to one another's houses, and then finally you can't actually even look at one another's faces.
Yeah.
It's Kafkaesque almost in I think the horror of it, and I don't shirk from using that word. It's one thing to endure certain restrictions, but I maintain the urge and the need to say this is horrible.
Yeah. No.
I won't mentally decide that wearing a mask in amongst an entire masked population is anything but horrible.
Yeah.
I absolutely refuse. It remains my right to refuse my consent. I don't have to consent. I don't have to accept that this is a good thing. And one of the most troubling elements for me throughout has been the extent to which it's the religiosity of it and the cultishness of it, where it's not enough to be seen to obey. You have to be seen to be celebrating what we're having.
Oh, you have to be enthusiastic about it. You get these people going, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with just wearing a mask if it saves lives?" Well, first of all, we have no idea if it saves lives anyway, and two, it's horrible. You know, how can you even want to do it?
My wife's been invited to one of these. It's around Christmas, and there's a group of folk locally. They've all bought a Christmas decoration for one another, like a Secret Santa thing.
Yeah.
But they're going to enact it via a Zoom call.
Right.
And I just find the thought of it absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's the idea of all these women, sat on their own somewhere with a glass of, with a glass of fizz,
right,
and the little parcel that they've been sent, and they're all going to open it and pretend to share this experience on screen.
Right.
And it's the best that people can do, and people are trying to, in inverted commas, make the best of it. Mustn't grumble.
Yeah.
And I hear that this is what's been planned for in a day or two's time, and it just makes me want to weep.
I know.
At the tragic nature of it, and yet people are supposed to say, "Well, hey, this is great.
Yeah.
Technology's taking up the slack,
right.
and we can."
Well, this is it. I mean, you and I have both kind of declared ourselves to be relatively, shall we say, unenthusiastic about being ordered around, and we don't like being told what to do. My mother, who is a survivor of what you and I have talked about before, the Clydebank bombings in the Second World War, running in and out of air raid shelters at the age of 16 or 17, declared at the weekend when I was talking to her on the phone that she didn't want the vaccine. She's going to give it to my sister instead, because she's like, "I'm 96, I don't really care, I don't want it." I put out a tweet to that effect. You would not believe the number of people who were critical of her for saying that. And I'm like,
I
she's
would
96 years of age, for Christ's sake.
I would believe that's the point. It's every all of these little inhumanities. We're supposed it's required that we smile in receipt of them.
Yeah.
That's the bit I find really, really difficult. And if your mum there has done something that's being perceived as an act of ingratitude. Here's this vaccine, and not receiving it with open arms has brought the retribution of those that are inclined to voice that kind of criticism. But when you say that, I knew that had happened. I saw you comment about it earlier,
right?
And I thought, yes, absolutely, I can see that. The thing, what I think is really troubling at the moment, but even more troubling, is with the advent of the vaccine, and there was this notional talk that light at the end of the tunnel, and we're going to get back to normal. But with the next breath, it was being said that the lady who had been the first in history to receive the vaccine, it wasn't going to protect her necessarily from getting the virus. It wouldn't necessarily stop her passing it to others. And even though she'd been vaccinated, if she tested positive, you'd still have to self-isolate in the usual way. And in my unscientific way, I thought, well, what difference is it making there? And exactly. I feel as if it's like in the early, they say that one of the Paul Fussell wrote a book about the Great War and modern memory, about irony being one of the artifacts that was left behind by the experience of the First World War. Because the idea being that however bad you thought things were, they were about to get worse and you just didn't know it.
Right.
And that kind of ironic sense began to permeate through poetry and through movies, Ever After, Catch-22 and all the rest of it are all products of that sense of irony. And I feel that we haven't seen the half of it.
No.
By the November of 1914, France was 1 million casualties down, with 4 years of the war still to go.
Right.
And you can imagine how people felt in France. They'd lost 1 million men. Surely this is as bad as it could possibly be.
Yes.
Worse than anyone could have imagined. But no, it was about to drag on for 4 times as long as it already had, and everything was going to become even more unimaginably terrible. Yeah. And my sense of dread, I almost feel as though I'm going through a stage of grieving for the world of before and my life of before. Because nothing is persuading me at the moment that it's anything but dead and buried.
Because I keep, because I'm like you. I mean, I am a sort of eternal optimist, and I keep expecting some light to go off in the heads of the people running the country, to say to them, look, whatever it is that we're doing here is not working. I mean, I wake up this morning to the news that they might be putting London back into Tier 3. Now, I know that you won't be very sympathetic to that because you've been effectively in Tier 3 for weeks and years and whatever. But, the idea that I've managed to be in pubs and restaurants in the last week since they reopened, the idea that they're all going to shut them again is absolutely unbearable. And I know that people will say, well, just get over yourself, you complete idiot. But I'm sorry, it's about seeing people. It's about going out. It's about actually the joy of sitting in a restaurant and hearing noise, hearing people talking, hearing kind of the clatter of activity. Yeah,
I mean, to me, what I've learned personally, this is what I think, public health is not my number one priority. I'll say that. I appreciate it's important, but I don't make it number one so that everything else has to be sacrificed on the altar of it.
Right.
What I've seen of the last few months, the damage that's been done, and so much of the damage, as we have said before, is invisible at the moment because people are being encouraged to look the other way. You don't look at the people who are suicidal. Don't look at the people who've lost everything or who are about to lose everything and become homeless and destitute and all the rest of it. Look at the fact that we've got a vaccine. Look at the fact that there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're being sort of shepherded through and encouraged not to look at the terrible things that we know are out there and have happened.
Right.
And I feel we're not realizing that this is a situation that is just going to go on.
Yeah.
Because the powers that we have seen, and we have shown them that we will put up with anything. We will do anything.
Yeah.
That we're encouraged to do in this climate of fear. And I saw somebody was writing about the fact that it would be masks all of next year. I think it was Patrick Vallance, was saying that the population would likely have to remain masked for the whole of next year. And that fills me with existential dread.
I know.
But this is now this is it. This is what life looks like now. And yes, we try to be optimistic, but I think the expression of that optimism is in a stubborn refusal to accept that this is normal. I will not. I'll go along with the group up to a point, but I will not consent. At no point will I say that this is acceptable, because to me it's not.
It's really not. And also, I mean, people like Valence, unfortunately, have got, in my view, far too much kind of power now in this particular matrix, because we believe them, or people believe them, and certainly the politicians believe them. You know, he's probably a guy who would have told you 10 years ago, you know, it'd be a really good idea to wear a mask when you're out and about in Glasgow or London or Leeds or Manchester or Sheffield, because, you know, the atmosphere might not be very good for your lungs. These are the kind of people who would have you wearing a mask anyway. And I think it's absolutely outrageous that they're trying to make it normal, because it isn't normal, whatever they say.
No, and I want to, well, do I? Yes, I want the spotlight turned on the people that we're not hearing from. Of course, people like Patrick Vallance and the rest of the scientists that are, you know, working around the clock, and they're busy interacting with their colleagues, and they've got an objective and a purpose to life, and they're being paid, and all of that is still going on for them. Likewise, the politicians, likewise, so many of the celebrity figures that are, you know, loudly endorsing all, and, you know, cheerleading, and, you know, pretending that there's this kind of blitz spirit about it. But we're not hearing from the broken people. And we know, and if you don't know, I don't know how you can have avoided it, that there are millions of people whose lives have been desperately affected by this.
Oh, for sure.
And we're not hearing from them. And because we're not looking at them and we're not hearing from them, we're being encouraged to think that, well, we're all in it together, and these are the necessary steps that have to be taken to get the population through this pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good while you pretend that the other things aren't happening. But I can't, because I hear about it and I see it and I know it instinctively that the population's mental health is being battered and pummeled. And just because you're not seeing those people who are being destroyed by this doesn't mean they're not out there.
No, of course. And let's not forget, Neil, that this all began in March. We all walked out of a bar, I think, for the last time, as far as we knew, in March, sometime like the 19th or the 18th or something, thinking we were going to have a month of some restrictions of one kind or another, that we wouldn't really be able to do that again for a while. A month, that was what we thought. You know, that was like nearly a year ago. You know?
And there's no end. I just don't believe there is an end in sight. This is what I mean about the, you know, I feel as if, I said last week, you know, as if we're in episode 1, season 1 of the pandemic box set.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it's already apparent that the vaccine is not going to be the great key that unlocks the gates that have kept us in. That's already been, we're already being encouraged to pour some cold water on that. We're all going to get it. You know, you'll have to get the vaccine,
right,
if you want to do anything in the future. But it's not going to take away the masks, and it's not going to take away the constant sword of Damocles prospect of lockdowns that are going to destroy one business after another. And, you know, the powers that be have satisfied themselves that this is a model that works for them. Yeah. They can pass the laws, they can get the compliance, and they remain paid. You know, they're functioning normally. And they've performed a triage on those that, you know, the drowned and the saved. And there are people out there, a section of the population out there who are just going to have to drown.
I know. And of course, watching people like Nicola Sturgeon, as we saw this week, of more or less warning off the royal couple, William and Kate, from coming to Scotland, and being quite sort of tight-lipped about it, and being quite sort of matter-of-fact about it, as if she, in fact, is now running the country, you know?
Well, that's a situation that could have and should have been avoided. If I was running Kensington Palace PR, there was no way that I would have allowed that goodwill tour, that whistle-stop tour of giving thanks, unless absolutely everyone, every step of the way, was publicly seen to be on song with it. And if there was any suggestion that anyone was going to use it for any kind of political gain or to score points, then No, I would not have allowed it. I wouldn't have allowed that to go ahead, because it was left as an open goal, or it was a mine onto which the hapless William and Kate were invited to step. It just that situation could have and should have been avoided, and the fact that it has in Scotland and in Wales been used for political advantage and to score another small point. How anyone, it never ceases to amaze me that Downing Street and the Palace and all the rest of it couldn't have foreseen that and could have decided on a separate course of action. What's the gain? It's just another way in which the royal family have been seen apparently to get the mood of the country wrong.
Yes.
They've done the wrong thing in Scotland and they've done the wrong thing in Wales. To whose benefit is that?
Right. Because the mood of the country now apparently is at the whim of the First Minister. She will tell you what the mood of the country is. She will tell you what the plan is for the country, and she will tell you exactly how to think about that.
Oh well, as I've said before, ad nauseum, it's always important to remember that the First Minister and the SNP speak for it's the SNP, and anyone anywhere, it's regardless if it means Scotland or Wales, or to say that you speak for the entire population is just hubristic. You can't. She doesn't, and nor could anyone else. When we know that the countries are so split the way they are, so polarised, so divided. Britain's divided. Scotland's divided. I don't know. I can't really speak to what the political situation is in Wales, and it would be unwise. I'm not going to get involved in that. But these are split populations, diametrically opposed, and split along a kind of a 50-50 line. And for anyone to presume to say that they speak for the nation, that's a mistake, because the First Minister does not. She speaks for the people who agree with her, who are a percentage of the population.
And it's as simple as that. Neil, great to talk to you again. Thank you. And stay strong, I think, is probably the best thing I can say to you. We're all in it together in the sense that at least those of us who are not enjoying it and who are not willing to put up with it can continue to complain and can continue to react against it, because we are not going to put up with this forever. We shouldn't have to. We're not going to.